Hello and welcome to a quick video on how I use Chat GPT for all of the code in daily drivers. To illustrate this, I want to look at one example, how I implemented and created the script, and then give some tips along the way. This example is specifically getting the play system in my game set up so I could monetize it. This was a complicated process that all in all took about 3 weeks to fully implement and was by far the hardest bit of game design I had to do. This system would include in-app purchases, ads, and the plays variable. And the way that all this works is that if the player has at least one play or the in-app purchase, then they can race a course. If they have less than one play and do not have the in-app purchase, then they need to watch an ad to get more plays to be able to race. Let's take a look at the first message I sent Chat GPT and how we kind of got things going. You might notice that this is a pretty short message, and this is because of the first tip I learned. When possible, let the AI figure things out in their own way. What do I mean by that? Well, I didn't know how in-app purchases were going to work or how I could create a variable to handle all this, so I simply said what needed to happen rather than giving details as to how. So specifically what I said was, the player will be able to purchase an in-app purchase that will get rid of the need for plays, and they will be able to race the available courses as much as they would like. I didn't know how this will happen, but I knew that I needed it to, and GPT was able to write out this, basically outlining how the in-app purchases would work, and then how I would integrate with this plays and racing logic. By simply outlining the key features, it meant that I was given a more detailed and complete answer, plus this can easily be understood by the AI moving forward because it created it. Later on, when I would reference the tracking plays method, the AI understood what we were talking about because we had already established what this was. Now that I have an outline, I can get to work on the code. I guess I'm not making the code, but I can get to work on getting GPT to make the code. There are a few problems I had with GPT's previous answer, like how it wanted to reduce the number of plays once the race was over. The user would be able to exploit this by quitting before the race ended if their time wasn't good enough, and that meant that they wouldn't lose a play. So in my next message, I wanted to make sure that GPT understood the correct way to do this, and I said that the number of plays should be lowered when the player clicks on a specific button. I also wrote out specifics for the text that would communicate to the player how many plays they had, a button in my scene that would eventually become the add button, and I added some console messages for debugging, and this is my next tip. ChatGPT loves when you have debugs. If I ever ran into problems, they could easily be solved if there were debug messages. You don't even need to know what these messages mean. You can just send them to GPT, and because ChatGPT is the one that implemented these, they'll understand what's going on. You also might have noticed that there is no mention of the in-app purchase here. This is because I had done some research, and it seemed like this would make more sense to add later on in the process, rather than right now, and I'll touch on why that is important in a little. Now we get to the good stuff, the script. Here's the actual code the AI wrote me. For me, the process is now as simple as copying this into Unity, creating the necessary game objects, and then getting things connected in the inspector. I use the outline sent to me to learn the variables and get a basic idea of what is happening, and then the next step is to either debug or move on to the next feature. Some of the simpler features in my game were solved in just a few messages, whereas this plays method took many back and forth messages. For instance, I immediately run into problems with the logic and realized that because of how I was loading scenes, we would need the script to be more specific with how it handles this. So I sent another script that GPT had already created, and we were able to figure out this problem. This other script handled how the scenes were loaded, so GPT was able to send me back updates that would now correctly handle scene loading. It was a simple implementation, but it worked, which leads me to my next tip: start simple. GPT gets overwhelmed very quickly. Many of the videos I'd watched where people try to make games included them asking for a bunch of features in a single message. Oftentimes they would find that this wouldn't work, and so my solution was to organize major features within their own chats. Not only does this help me stay organized, but it also helped reduce the number of times GPT would hallucinate, which is to say, if I requested too many features, oftentimes GPT would create and reference scripts that did not exist. Then, the process was going back and forth with little changes like this one, where I wanted the text to look different. Again, by making small changes, I was able to ensure that each step worked before moving on to the next. Since I do not know how to code, this was essential to getting more complicated features fully implemented. And that is basically it. I spent a couple days refining the system, and then it was on to adding ads and the in-app purchase. Some systems that I've created have been easier than others, And my next tip is that I have found that alongside simplicity, the more isolated a feature is, the easier it is to create. So for instance, setting up the help screen for my game took just a few hours to completely design and implement because it didn't have to reference any other scripts. Whereas setting up the share button took a couple days because it had to interact with save files and several scripts. So if you're thinking about a kind of game to create, it might help you to think about how all of these scripts are going to interact with each other, because the more isolated things are, the easier it will be to create. All in all, the project has 45 scripts that the AI created. It's a hands-on, time-consuming process, but 4 months ago, I barely even knew what Unity was, and now I have released 2 games. Now I offer a question to you. When you play the game, can you tell that it was made by AI? You've seen this video and you've kind of had that spoiled for you, but if you want a fun experiment, get a friend to download the game and see if they can tell that something is up. I am genuinely curious if video games as a medium can clearly show their AI roots like ART does, so let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching the video. If this is interesting to you, please subscribe. You can download the app on the Google Play Store and the App Store in the comments below. Thank you.